Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Industrial Real Estate Show. I am pleased to be joined by co-host Matt Carroll and repeat favorite guest of ours, Dr. Jim Tompkins. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me on the call.
Good to be back.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
Looks like Matt's already. Yeah, Matt's. You were frozen there for a second. I hope you're good now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Can you hear us? Yes, your video is frozen, but we'll work around that for now, and hopefully the internet connection comes back for you. But I want to jump right into this because there's a lot to take into account right now. And as much as I don't want to talk about tariffs, that's all that President Trump seems to want to talk about. And more news this week on what's happening with China and perhaps more tariffs. So, Jim, I want to turn it over to you to start. Are the tariffs working in your view?
Well, the tariffs are a strategy. And as a strategy, we need to understand what the strategy is. So Trump is a negotiator. Okay, he's a real estate guy, but he's not a supply chain guy. He's not a global trade guy. He is a negotiator. And so he sees something that's very basic. And the very basic thing is the last time we had a trade surplus in the United States was in 1975. 1976, and every year since 1976, we've had a trade deficit. For the last 4 years, 21, 22, 23, and 24, it's been over $1 trillion trade deficit. And we now, last year, 2024, we had a $1.2 trillion trade deficit. Now, something in my household when I grew up, Dad earned the money and Mom was kind of the CFO. The CFO sat me down when I got a newspaper out and she said, okay, Jim, you're making $4 a month. Here's how it works. You put 40 cents into savings and you spend $3.60. You always save 10% of what you make. And I said, why? She said, because you're going to lose your job and before you get the next job, you're going to need some rainy day money. And so no person can run a deficit for long. No country can run a deficit for long. And so President Trump was elected to create a surplus of our balance of trade and to get out of running a budget deficit. And so that was what he was run on. And so his belief is that tariffs can do that. Now, there's some idiots out there that want to say tariffs are inflationary. Well, the front page of the Wall Street Journal said 4 months in a row, 4 months of tariffs, they're not inflationary. So tariffs, in theory, are inflationary unto themselves. But if you do tariffs, you do regulations, you do tax cuts, you do other things, tariffs does not have to be inflationary. So front page Wall Street Journal said this morning, Trump's tariffs are not inflationary. And so that's a good topic. When we look at what's going on with respect to what the trade balance, in the month of May, we had a income of $22.2 billion in May. That's 6% of our federal government came from tariffs. Okay, so we are eating away at the deficit that we're running. Now, that high tariff rates we're running now are just a transitory state. And so what we have to do is look at the bigger picture. So you look at, okay, Trump got 312 electoral votes, and that said the country told him, do what you ran on. He ran on MAGA. And so he's going to make America great again. That's what he's trying to do. And there's some key issues there. And if we look at what he's done in the different 100-day segments, and I wrote this down for the first 100 days, his goal was immigration. He closed the border. He reduced federal workforce, and he obtained domestic commitments for investment of $1 trillion. The second 100 days, that's May, June, and July. So we're right in the middle of that now. He did the reciprocal tariffs, and he began negotiation. That negotiation is between two situations. Trump sees there is direct negotiation with China, or there is an alliance coalition that negotiates with China. How does he decide which one to do? Direct, or does he go with his alliance and negotiate with China? He said, well, what I like to do is I like to attack the weakest enemy with the maximum strength. And so at the beginning of May, he said, who is the maximum enmity and maximum strength? Who has the maximum weakness that we can attack with the greatest strength? And the answer was China. So he went after China. And so we put a reciprocal tax in there. They responded, we responded, and it got ridiculous. I mean, it got 154% tariff. Let's face it, when you get to about 70% tariff, the country shuts down. There's no more trade. And so the difference between 145% and 154% is zero. There's no difference. You're going to do zero trade at 145, you're going to do zero trade at 154. So what they did is they got in a tit for tat thing. It's like two 12-year-old boys in the backyard fighting over, who gets the bat first. I mean, it's just a stupid fight. It doesn't make sense. And so what we saw take place then is they decided, okay, let's cool the jets for 90 days. And so they're going to cool the jets for 90 days. Then they began discussion again. They reached an agreement, and then they both broke the agreement. And now they've reached the same agreement over again. I think this time they reached the agreement, and it's for real, because Trump really needs rare earth minerals, and China really needs to start selling to America again. China's going to go under if they don't open up their markets to sell to America. So now they've reached a reasonable peace, and the Chinese says we now have a consensus. In the United States, we say we have a framework. Well, what's the definition of consensus in China? Consensus means we're well past the 50% point, and we know where we're going to wind up. And so that's stronger. The word consensus in China is stronger than the word framework in the United States. So we now have a deal with China. So if we have a deal with China, and that's going to be codified before July 9th, which is Trump's deadline, what we're going to see is that the other alliances, the other tariffs are going to come along. So we're going to right away, we've already did the UK. We're now going to do South Korea. We're now going to do Japan. We're now going to do India. And these are going to follow along in a very orderly path. And so the tariffs accomplish the objectives of getting us closer to a balance of trade, balance or surplus. And it also is getting other things of the intellectual capital, intellectual property, looking at fentanyl, looking at human rights and all those things. So we really have done in the second 100 days an unbelievably good job of selling tariffs and putting them in place. Yes, there was some pain. There was some significant pain. Trump said that at the outset. There's going to be significant pain, and there has been tremendous amount of uncertainty. But the fact of the matter is that pain's going to be over by July. And if you recall, when we chatted earlier, we said the pain was going to be over by June or July. It's now going to be June or July where it goes away. Trump's making some progress on the peace deals, not as much as we would like to see. Ukraine, Gaza Strip, Iran, and Taiwan are still in trouble. Inflation is handled. We've got it. Eggs, coffee, gas, we got it. It's covered. And then what he did in the second 90 days is he got another $1 trillion from UAE, Dubai, and Qatar. If we look at the third 100 days, my prediction was that we're going to have the tariff deals done. They're going to be completed. We're going to have some peace deals done. We're going to have the big, beautiful bill is going to pass, which is going to give us the tax cut we need. We're going to be working beyond foreign trade and looking at real foreign policy. And then the fourth 100 days is going to be on trade and foreign policy, world peace, working on a balanced budget, and a strong emphasis on law and order. So I am not a Trump advocate. I'm not a politician. I'm a supply chain guy. So I look at this from a supply chain point of view, and tariffs are accomplishing the objectives. We're going to do what my mom told me a long time ago. Don't spend more than you make, and get rid of the loans or the debt you've had in the past. And that's exactly what we're doing. and it's working really well. There's some bumps, of course. There's a lot of bumps because this is a very complex situation. But in the next week and a half, Trump says we're going to have all the other countries covered, and so we're going to have a very, very, very good position as we end June, and we're going to be well along our way. So absolutely, tariffs are working, and and some people say, well, it's working for America. No, no. America is the largest economy in the world. If America doesn't do well, the world does not do well. Okay, and so this is a win for everyone in Europe. This is a win for everyone in Asia. This is a win for everyone in Latin America because we're going to start playing on a balanced playing field, and we're going to allow globalization to really work and work well. So yeah, I'm excited. I feel really good about where we are. Trump should feel good about his midterm elections. I'm not sure, people still think he's somewhat of a jerk and arrogant and says stupid stuff, and he does. I mean, that's a fact that you can't dodge that. But let's have a stupid contest. Is it what's more stupid now, the Democrats or the Republicans? I don't know. I think they both sound like a bunch of clowns. But I'm not political, so I won't say that.
Well put. Chad and I were having that conversation before you jumped on. Jim, was everything now is identity politics, it seems, and there's such a lack of substance when it comes to these conversations. And so I think it's important to frame the conversation the way you did so that we can have a substantive conversation about what's happening and extract the political side of it, which many people go to immediately as a knee-jerk reaction. And with the context of what you just mentioned, what I would love to talk about is the idea of globalization, deglobalization, almost reglobalization, right? And how that's affecting, because I know in a lot of past chats that we've had, we've talked a lot about geopolitical issues and other things that are shifting the global economy in different ways and how that's affecting supply chains, in this case, tariffs. When we talk about reglobalization, how do you view what's happening right now with tariffs, how that's affecting, let's say, policy and where we're heading with supply chain, and even what you're thinking, like what we see on our end for Chad and I's, what we do every day, it's real estate, right? So what we hear often is this whole reshoring, nearshoring, onshoring, those types of different things because of what you're describing right now, that things are shifting away from China. So walk us through how that reglobalization piece is shifting and shaping really the economy and where we're heading with all these different components.
So it's several good points there, Matt. I really appreciate it. And it's appropriate. One thought that you brought to mind when we're talking about switching things up, something that's occurred since we last talked is the name taco. Trump always chickens out is a phrase people use. I see people using whiplash or about face or lack of direction, change of direction with respect to Trump and what's going to happen. Let's just suppose that Chad and I are basketball coaches. And I don't know how many people know, Matt, you were a starter at Purdue basketball, which I'm a Purdue guy, so that's important to me. But Chad and I are now basketball coaches. And we're playing Indiana. Purdue's playing Indiana. And Chad and I really want Purdue to win. And so we've developed.
For the benefit of everyone watching who doesn't know this, Purdue and IU are fierce rivals.
So yes. Thank you for that, Matt. I just assumed everyone knew that, but you're right. It's good.
Doesn't everybody? Yeah.
Yes. So Chad and I come up with the perfect offense, the perfect defense. We have a whole week to prepare for the game. We train our guys, we work them, we work out, and we are absolutely ready to play that game. Chad and I come into the game with our plan. Our players are ready, and we go out on the floor. And at the end of the first half, it's 52-38. Now, what are Chad and I going to do when we go in the locker room at halftime? We're not going to say, guys, we have a great plan and we're going to stick to it. We're not going to do that, because what we're going to say is, hey, IU has thought about this game better than we did, and they changed up their offense and they changed up their defense. And so we're playing the offense, we're playing against the offense and defense they had a week ago, and they're kicking our tails. And what we need to do is we need to adjust to the game that the other side is playing. And so here's what we're going to do in the second half. And so in the second half, we come out and we're doing this different, doing this different, doing this different. And at the end of the game, we win. Now, are people going to say that Chad and Jim, as coaches, chickened out? Or what they're going to say is we're really smart because we adjusted to the competition.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Trump is now. Trump is his strategy is unchanged. But what's happened is he's adjusting to the competition. And so this happens and he does this. This happens, he does this. This happens. So he's playing options. And we all know a good basketball team, a good football team has options. And if they do this, then we do this. If they do this, then we do that. And that's what Trump has done. So it is a very fast-paced game. And there are a lot of things that have changed up substantially, but that doesn't mean that we're chickening out. What it means is we're thinking. And Chad and I should be congratulating for winning that basketball game. And we just beat IU 92-88. And that was a great win. And I love it. And so that's what we need to think about is how are we dealing with the optionality of what we're doing? Now, you mentioned reglobalization. Reglobalization is the same thing. The chief supply chain officer, the chief procurement officer, the chief transportation officer of a company came up with a plan. And that plan was based upon how can we minimize cost. And so one of the things we did is we found a really great supplier that was low cost, and we gave them 100% of our business. Well, as it turns out, that might not have been a good move because that puts all of our eggs in one basket. And as we saw when COVID hit, putting all your eggs in one basket is not a smart thing to do. So what we need to do is we need to have some optionality. And the optionality would say that's optionality isn't let's put 90% with this company and 10% with this company. That's not optionality. That's messing around. Because if this 90% guy goes away, you can't give this guy 100% and expect him to work. And so what we need is real optionality is 40, 40, 20. And now if one of my 40% drops out, I can give this guy 60 and give this guy 40 and still make it. And so what we need to do is we need to avoid putting our eggs in one basket. And so the way to do that is with reglobalization. Some things we should bring back home. Some things we should do closer to home. Some things we should do to countries which are friendly with us. And so that's going to result in what if this tariff is in place? What if this tariff is in place? And we need to look at those scenarios, and we need to make the decision not based on minimal cost, but on maximum resilience. How can we make sure that the supply chain is going to continue to operate over time? And I think this is really, really, really important. Now, if we look at that from the point of view of how we should be thinking about it, if we're a 3PL or if we are a company that's doing warehousing for themselves, what we need to realize is that there is a way we should think about this. Maybe a thing that's smart to do, back to the Chad and Jim and the Purdue, Indiana game, is understand your competition. Okay, so you don't play this game without understanding the competition. What did China do in 2015? They published a report called MIC 2025. What did MIC stand for? Made in China. And what they did in 2015, they published a report, Made in China in 2025. And what that did is that created a series of clusters where those clusters allow us to understand where we should be locating different types of business. And so if we look at what's going to happen, what I think we're going to see is strategic sectors like semiconductors, pharma, advanced materials, energy, and infrastructure are going to return to the United States because that's in the best security interest of the United States. tech-heavy operations with limited headcount going to return to the United States. Facilities which you can automate and eliminate the headcount, those will be brought back to the United States. Garments, footwear, toys, low-wage assembly, that's not going to come back ashore. That you can't achieve a balanced budget if you can buy an item from Vietnam for $1 and then moving that to California and making it for $2 and come out ahead. That's not going to work. And so we do need to go with the lower cost countries on an optionality basis. But so if I am interested in being a 3PL, or if I'm in the semiconductor industry, what I'm going to do is the same thing the Chinese have done. What the Chinese have done is for each industry, they've picked out 3 supply chain hubs, and they want to locate the assets around those hubs. So if you're in the semiconductor industry and you're trying to do 3PL work, or you manufacture semiconductors, the places to go are Phoenix, Austin, Texas, and Columbus, Ohio. So that's a smart place to be thinking about. Now, if you're making toys, you want to still, if you're doing 3PL for toys, you better stay by the ports, because that stuff's coming in on the ocean from someplace. And what we need to do is be close to the port. But semiconductors, Phoenix, Austin, Texas, and Columbus, that's a long way from the ports. But that's where the volume is. That's where the major homes of semiconductor fab and semiconductor R&D, that's where they are. If you're in pharmaceuticals, you should be in New Jersey, you should be in Boston, or you should be in North Carolina. Why? Because that's where those countries, those companies that are in that industry are focusing. And that's where you're going to get the 3PL business, or if you're in those business. If you're in advanced materials, you should be in San Jose, you should be in Indiana, and you should be in Pittsburgh. If you're in the energy business, you should be in Houston, Phoenix, or Detroit. If you're in the infrastructure business, you should be in Dallas, Chicago, or Atlanta. And if you're high tech, you should be in Silicon Valley, Seattle, or Austin. And so these are the places you want to be located. And so you want to think about, okay, I'm going to be a 3PL for what industry? Well, I want to do footwear and apparel. Go to the water. You should locate yourself, because footwear and apparel for the long term, many, many years, is going to be coming in from overseas. We're not going to make that stuff here. Not going to happen. If you are going to be in automated manufacturing, you should be in Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Chicago. And so that's what China did. They said, where is MIC 2025 going to be? And it gives you a region. And so when a 3PL asked me, where should I be located? I said, well, who are your target customers? He said, well, our target customers are people that make footwear and apparel. I said, you go to the water. You need to be at the water, because things are coming in at the water. And then what you're going to need is a couple mixing centers in the center of the country someplace. But primarily the volume is going to be at the water. But if you're one of these other industries, go to the places I mentioned, because that's where the action is going to be, and that's where they're going to be buying space. So real estate needs to be affected by where the action is going to be. And just people aren't making real estate decisions based upon each individual company. They're based on where is the manufacturing centers for those different products and different opportunities. So I think it's really clear, depending upon the circumstance, where a company should be thinking about locating and why they should go there and how they should make it happen and so forth. If you're, doing cold storage, where do you go? You go where people are high density. The greater the population, the more food they eat, therefore the more cold storage they need. And so for each industry sector, there's an answer. Now, some people say, well, what do you think about Salt Lake City? I said, Salt Lake City is a great location, but what are you doing? Okay, and once you tell me what you're doing, then I can say, well, that's a good location, that's not a good location. So it takes a different level of analysis than just say, well, I'm going to bury a 3PL and I'm not sure what I'm going to handle. Well, I'm not sure where you should locate. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. I don't know.
Well, Jim, in the past, we've been talking on this. You've been on this podcast many times now, and over the years, because I think it's been multiple years that we've been talking, we've talked about different scenarios politically that have led to where we are today. In fact, Chad and I, when we spoke in Seattle at the NAIOP event, one of the things that we talked about was indeed this optionality type of perspective, right? And back then, one of the things that we were talking about was how the rail, the merger of that going from basically Mexico up to Canada, how that was going to affect things. But with this reglobalization and optionality point of view, and tariffs in the mix, and you hear all these different things that are very politicized, but this is where it becomes a discernment type of point of view, as to extracting what is actually true and what isn't, and what can I believe, what can I not. And so when I think about those types of things, I think about people like you who can kind of explain away better kind of what the truth is in all of this. So when I think about, let's say, Mexico's role right now and everything we just discussed, right? Or even Canada, where Chad is at, how does that affect? Because in the past, you and I have talked about how the ports over time might become less strategic because of the way globalization is shifting. How do you see what's being manufactured in, let's say, Mexico and along the border? How do you envision? At one point, you and I were talking about the Dominican Republic becoming strategic. How do you view those countries in Brazil for apparel and leather goods? How do you view that shifting the where people are planning to be and how they should strategize around that? How tariffs are affecting that piece? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're right on, Matt. And Mexico, there's some people feel. I mean, Trump put Mexico and Canada in the same bucket for a moment. Trump's statements about Canada becoming 51st state, I mean, that's just nonsense. And I don't know why he goes there, but it's silly.
We're coming to you, Chad.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's I mean, I'm not voting for my church leader. I'm trying to get someone who gets the economy working fair. And I said the last 4 years we've had over $1 trillion. That's not a Biden problem. I mean, this problem. I mean, I love JFK and I loved Reagan, and guess what? Neither one of them did squat on this one either. They didn't fix this problem either. This has been going on since 1976, for crying out loud. So this is a long-term build-up disaster, and no one had the courage to face it because they knew, oh, this is going to be really trouble. So you get Trump, who's got the courage to face this, but he comes with other baggage, and so we got to deal with that. Both Canada kind of had some word fights, and we're going to cut off their water, and we're going to do this and that. And Mexico played it much cooler. The president, the lady in Mexico, did a great job of just kind of being cool. She got a little bit upset on some of the agricultural issues, but they basically stayed kind of in their zone. Neither one came up with retaliatory tariffs. And why was it? It's because they were protected by the USMCA agreement. They didn't. There's been big tariff impacts on them other than the steel and aluminum thing that we did with China. But they are basically doing the business they were before. And Trump was holding them in abeyance. If he couldn't get China to buckle, what he was going to do is he was going to sign Mexico and Canada next. But since he did get China to buckle, now he can work with them, and he's still going to have that done by July 9th. But it's not such an immediate priority. Canada has great natural resources that we need. Mexico has a great labor market. Their education is high. Their work ethic is excellent. Their desire to become an industrialized nation is strong. A strong advantage you have when you're in Mexico, you're in the center of the country. You're right across from Texas, which is in the center of the country. And so it's a good place to bring things in. In fact, you can come in on the west coast of Mexico and bring it right over to Monterrey and then up. There's a great transportation capability there. The border is relatively easy crossing because of our relationships. And so there's going to be a lot of manufacturing done in Mexico. There's a lot of specialty things Mexico does well. Mexico does shoes very, very well. That's leather shoes, not rubber-soled shoes. Rubber-soled shoes are going to be down in Brazil. But Mexico has some great capability for leather shoes. They're going to be doing large things. So refrigerators, automobiles, stoves, appliances in general should be coming from Mexico because you want them. Those are very expensive to transport. Well, it's easy to just bring them across the border. It's a simple thing to do into the center of the country. So Mexico is going to continue to grow in gross national product, is going to continue to get more and more of a balanced budget. Mexico is a unique one because it's not balanced budget, balance of trade. They have a huge negative balance of trade, but on the other side of the coin, being fair, they have a huge positive. We have a positive with them with respect to balance of services. So we sell them a lot of services, and you really, to be fair, you need to add services and trade together. And if you do that, Mexico is about a wash. And so Mexico is a great place. It's going to be a great manufacturing location, a lot cheaper to manufacture there. The same overall conclusion with Canada. Great skill sets for automation, technology development is going to come from Canada. And so Canada, United States, and Mexico are going to be a huge block of strength, and that's going to prosper. And Mexico is going to do well. Canada is going to do well. The United States is going to do well. And we need to make sure that we don't do anything stupid in the middle to kind of mess that up. We need to make sure that we take care of the rare earth minerals for Canada because they need them for the automotive industry. All the work in Mexico needs rare earth minerals too. So we've got to deal with China now. We need to be looking at how we can de-emphasize the amount of help we need from China on rare earth minerals. There's a interesting reality. China today controls 90% of the global rare earth minerals. The U.S. imports 77% of its rare earth minerals from China. Just a couple years ago, that was 80%. And so we've got it from 80% down to 77% over the last 3 years. Japan has reduced the dependency on rare earth minerals from China from 91% down to 58% over the last 15 years. So they're seeing this. Europe is in huge trouble. Europe gets 99% of the rare earth minerals from China, and so it's a real hit there. And so the United States is there's a lot of rare earth minerals in the United States. There's a lot of rare earth minerals in Canada. There's a lot of rare earth minerals in Greenland. There's a lot of rare earth minerals in Congo, and we're forming a relationship with the Congo. We formed a relationship with Ukraine, who has a lot of rare earth minerals. And the challenge there is the mining and then the processing, and that's an expensive process. And so to move the needle there, you need to take 7 to 10 years. And so we need to get to work on that. And so rare earth mineral mining and processing in the U.S., in Canada, in Ukraine, in Congo, in Greenland are really, really, really important because that's where they are. And that's going to take away one of the, excuse the phrase, trump cards that China has now. And so we need to understand that that is a real need. At the same time, China has really invested a lot of money and a lot of capability, and they're the best at that in the world now. And so we have to find things where we can negotiate with them, like opening our market, like selling them jet engines, like allowing them to have access to AI technology for design of AI chips and so forth. And we can do that, and that's going to come about. Trump's agreed to it. Xi has agreed to it, and I really feel good about that. So I think the reglobalization effort begins with the question, where should we make something? At Tompkins Ventures, we have a tool called reshoring. Reshoring is now a free tool. You can go in and you can use it, and it can tell you what are the impacts of you changing location from a cost, from a tariff, and from an inventory point of view. And this will give you alternatives to look at. And so we're saying, okay, today we're getting in from China. here's an option in Malaysia, here's an option in Indonesia, and here's an option in India. And here's the cost differential. And now we can actually go out and work with procurement teams and find where we should have it made, do RFPs and create the outsourcing process. So it's really important we get this on. I still see a lot of companies sitting there and say, well, too much uncertainty. The uncertainty is almost over. I mean, don't wait until the end. You need to start planning on this now. Just doing nothing is not viable. And Matt, one other point to your question, great question, has to do with seeing the future and looking to the future, not looking backwards, but looking forward. If you, I wrote a book on this. Hadn't planned to talk about it, so it's on the other side of the desk. But the book is Insightful Leadership, and the subtitle, I don't know if you can read it, but the subtitle says Surfing the Waves of Organizational Excellence. Surfing the Waves of Organizational Excellence. What does that mean? Well, what that means is if I want to surf, and you're ashore, and what I want to do is I want to get a ride and come to you. And so I'm on my surfboard, and what am I going to be looking at you? No, I'm not looking at you. What I'm doing is I'm looking over my shoulder at the waves. And you see that next wave coming? It's not a good one. It's not much power behind. See the wave after that? It's going to be a good wave, but it's going to break over there. I'm over here, so I'm not going to. See the third wave? Oh my goodness, look at that third wave. It's rolling. It's got a lot of power. It's coming right to me. So obviously, in this example, I have to be an expert surfer so I can recognize the third wave. But when the third wave approaches, I'm not sitting there idle. I have to paddle to get in front of the wave so I can harness the power of the wave. I harness the power of the wave, and even me, I have hairs blowing. You can't believe it, I have hair blowing. But I actually have hairs blowing, only a few, but I'm going ashore, and I got a great ride because I got in front of the power of that wave. If you're late getting in front of the wave, what happens? The wave comes, it knocks you out, and you wind up eating sand. And so what we need to do is we need to surf the waves of organizational excellence by having insight, by having knowledge about what a good wave looks like, by having an understanding of what's going to happen next. And that's what gives us the ability to respond to these things before they happen and not wind up being a second-class wave chaser.
That is a great analogy. I really like that one. And we'll definitely reference your book in the show notes. I have a question for you that perhaps disrupts the apple cart and makes it even difficult to see, call it the fifth wave. And I also want to get your thoughts on whether the deal between the US and China intensifies this or perhaps lessens it. And that's the seemingly imminent takeover of Taiwan. It seems like that's been discussed for years now. Even when Russia invaded Ukraine, that seemed like it was laying the foundation for China to do the same. And they've talked about it. They've been increasing their navy size. It seems like they've been running drills. Do you think that is imminent? And then I guess I'd ask you that first, and then there's another thread I'd like to pull on.
So I'm a supply chain guy, and as a supply chain guy, I understand why China wants to do that, but I also understand why that'll never really help them, because Taiwan will blow themselves up before they get taken over. And so what they're going to wind up with if they do attack is owning additional real estate in an island that has nothing on it that's worth capturing. So Taiwan as a real estate piece is not that significant. What's significant there is their capabilities with semiconductors and the research. And in fact, some of that's already leaving. Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company is making a major investment in West Lafayette, Indiana at Purdue, making a major investment in Arizona. And so Taiwan is going to become more of a, gee, that was an interesting thing to discuss about and disagree about, but most of the assets of Taiwan have left. Is it worth the battle, the world's wrath for us taking that over? I don't know. China's going to have to figure that out. I understand why Russia went in Ukraine. They wanted the access to the water and they wanted the
Mhm.
rare earth minerals. So that made sense to me from an aggressor perspective. It doesn't mean it's right, it's wrong to go and tax someone else's land and try to kill their people and do evil things. So Russia is clearly wrong there, but I understand why they would do it. I no longer get why China wants to go after Taiwan. It's not that big a priority as far as what they're going to gain if they get it, because when they get there, there won't be anything left of what they wanted. So I do not think that's going to happen. I think that's already been somewhat de-escalated with the investments. Taiwan has taken a lot of their advanced stuff out of Taiwan, and so what's left is factories which are equivalent to what China has already. And so why would they go through the bother and all the wrath of the world? China wants to be a main player in the world, and attacking Taiwan is not going to help that.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with you too. I truly hope it doesn't happen, because I think that just opens up issues on every front. Like, there's the whole world will suffer, and China, I think, would suffer the most from doing it. So to take a small amount of real estate and disrupt the entire global economy seems like a narrow-minded approach. So I hope that that's the case. Is that something that is keeping some companies awake at night, or is that just something that hope gets kicked down the road and it's something that never actually materializes? Or when you're talking to companies, do they bring that up as a potential issue?
What gets brought up there is the importance of the defense of the United States and the other countries of the world, that we are not in a position of weakness. Um, And it's been proven. I mean, Russia had this objective of taking over the Ukraine in 2 weeks. That didn't work. Um, and that's when most of Europe was not really taking investment in military as serious. We now have investment in military around the world as being serious. We're seeing lots of development there. And as long as there is a strong uh, uh, contingency of people that are willing to fight on behalf of Taiwan, I think China will stay out, and therefore the risk is not great. Um, you don't hear it talked about a lot. You do see it mentioned as kind of a gambling chip. Okay, an example of a gambling chip is I never quite understood Trump's huge negative thinking about Harvard. I understand there's some things there that are not right, but that's universities, that's IIR. I'm a retired university professor. I did that for 10% of my career. Um, I still have a portion of me that is a part of Purdue that I love. And I couldn't understand Trump's aggressiveness there. I think Trump's aggressiveness there, we now understand it just from the last 2 days. What he wanted to do is position this in a way that he could then take away the ability of the Chinese getting the best education in the world, which is U.S. education. And he took that away when he took he was going to pull the visas of all the Chinese students. And China looked at that and said, oh my goodness, all the really, really, really leader people in China go to school in the United States. We can't afford to have this happen. And so he bought himself a gambling chip that now he could put on the table and said, okay, we'll give all your people the visas back. And that was a huge win for China. And it didn't really cost us anything, because those Chinese students pay a lot of money to go to school in the United States. And it's a good thing for academia. So I think it was. I think that's where we are with Taiwan. It's kind of more of a chit that you want to be able to put on the table when you need to. But I really don't think it's going to come down to World War III. I don't think anyone's dumb enough to do that.
And maybe to piggyback off that question Chad asked, what comes to mind for me in the broader context beyond Taiwan, when we think about companies and how you mentioned, West Lafayette and some other moves that were made away from Taiwan. When I think about a company in general, whether they be in manufacturing or otherwise, how should companies be addressing tariffs or what's happening geopolitically around the world, if I am company X, Y, or Z, and I am, as you said, looking back towards the waves and thinking about, well, what wave should I ride and where is that heading? How do I prepare? What do you think when we talk about optionality? And we've talked about all these different countries and options to be in, states to be located here in the United States, even. If you were agnostic in terms of not pharma over energy over toys or other industries you mentioned, but just in general, what do you think is a good strategy optionality wise as we start to think about how to ride that wave and strategize and think about the future? Where should I be positioned? I tell people all the time, when you think about a Nike, for example, they're not going to all just leave, China, for example, or Southeast Asia and bring everything back manufacturing wise to this country. Well, the largest growing middle class in the world is happening in Southeast Asia and in China. So there is that component to all of this also, right? These American companies have a foothold there for a reason and will for the foreseeable future. But for everyone, for the component of their companies that are supplying to this side of the hemisphere and to the western side of the world, what do you think is a good strategy to mitigate risk against tariffs and against all these other aspects that we're talking about right now?
Well, I think it starts, Matt, with us looking at how vulnerable are we? What is the impact on what the tariffs are going to wind up as? And is that substantial? Is that significant? Does that give us a motivation to do something different? I get people asking me all the time, what should I do with tariff? And I said, well, what's your exposure? They say, what do you mean? I said, well, let's say the tariffs that are in existence today take place. How much money is that going to cost you a year? And they said, well, we don't really know because we don't buy directly from China. We buy from another party that buys from China and they sell it to us. I said, well, then don't ask me, ask the guy you're buying from because the tariff goes on the first sale. Okay. And so if you have a guy that's buying from China, he's the one that has to worry about tariffs. And then how much of that is he going to pass on to you? So let's say there's a 15% tariff that's relevant. The guy that has the first sale, he's got to pay 15%. But is he going to pay 15% or is he going to go to a supplier and say, hey, I want you to eat 5% of that? So you eat 5%. You didn't create the tariff. I didn't create tariff. They just got created. So I want you to eat 5%. And then me, as the first sale, I'm going to pay the 15%, but it's 5% going to come from you. And then I'm going to pass 5% on to the guy that's in the U.S. So the guy in the U.S., it might be a 15% tariff, but his piece of it is going to be 5. And so it's the supply chain needs to have these conversations and talk about how can we do that. In the short term, there's several things you can do. Number one, buy before the tariffs take effect. If you really think the tariffs are going to be a problem for you after July 9th, well, then buy it now. Get it, it doesn't have to get here. It just has to leave there. So the tariff is due once it leaves there. So you buy the inventory earlier. Talk about when you do bring it in, don't bring it into your warehouse, bring it into a bonded warehouse, bring it into a free trade zone. And if you do that, you're not avoiding the tariff, but you're avoiding when you have to pay the tariff. You get to pay the tariff later. Look at what countries can you do cost cutting with. I'm working with a client. I'm not going to mention specifics because I don't want to give up the strategy, but this company uses a lot of aluminum parts, which are under a heavy tariff from China. And so what we did is we had the aluminum parts, the aluminum shipped not from China to the U.S. We had it shipped from China to the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic then does substantial machining on that aluminum. And no, it's no longer aluminum. It's now parts that are going to go into farm vehicles. And so, but there's no tariff between China and Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic has no tariffs on stuff that's coming now. If we took the aluminum from China and we brought it to the Dominican Republic and then sent it to the United States, we would still have to pay the tariff because it's still aluminum. But now we take the aluminum out of China, we move it over here, and now they're components, and now we don't have to pay any tariff. And guess what? we actually can machine those cheaper in the Dominican Republic than we can do it in the United States anyway. So we're circumventing the tariff in that way. We can also look at maybe we buy the aluminum components from India, where there's going to be a much lower tariff, and so we re-globalize by moving it to a different country. So I think the reality is a lot of folks are concerned about tariffs, but they don't really understand the implications, and the implications oftentimes are nowhere near what they're afraid they're going to be. In fact, I see people that are not. It's not their responsibility to pay the tariffs. They're getting all upset about it. And I said,
Mm.
well, wait a minute. You might get a pass down to you, but have you read your contracts? Do you have what's in your contract? Can you assume the right of the purchase price for that product for the next year, and maybe then they have to deal with the tariff. I mean, you just because they got hit by a tariff doesn't mean you do. It depends what the contract says. So I think it's really important to have an educated view of this and really look at it carefully.
I think that's a very healthy perspective to take on it. Uh, we're just about out of time, but I'd still love to get your thoughts on one more thing before we do end. And and I think the big companies are going to have access to smart consultants like yourself, and they're going to figure out ways around this. What do you say to the small companies, the small, medium, or the mom and pop shop that perhaps all they sell is toys that they bring in from China, and they get hit with big tariffs that they're afraid that they can pass on to the customers, and that's just one example. I'm sure that there's plenty others, because I'm guessing there's a lot of people out there that are genuinely concerned about this still. What advice would you have for them that are in a position where they don't have access to top strategists like yourself, and they're just trying to navigate this uncertainty?
Well, I think the toys is a great example because China has done such a great job on focusing in that industry. The first industry in the 2015 report MIC 2025 was toys. And so that's the one that they targeted first. And so they really stepped way out ahead of that and have done a great job and have got a lot of automation in the facilities. And it's really tough to beat the price. It's not because their labor is cheap, it's because they've eliminated the labor. And so they've really, really done a good job there. Um, but nevertheless, if they put a tariff on it, and right now the tariff for China all in is 55%, that's a big tariff. So what I would be doing is I would be looking to Mexico and asking the questions. And so another thing I can do, the SBA, the Small Business Administration, has a where you can buy equivalent products from the United States and get pricing there. If you're faced with a 55% tariff, you probably can find somebody who's got an automated factory that can make those toys in the United States. And so it's a Small Business Administration, U.S. Subcontractors website, and you can go in there at no charge, and it can tell you where we can go look and the names of people that make certain types of products, and that can give you a good a starting point. So um, don't don't sit there idle. Go get active and call the government, ask what they can, how they can help you. I mean, Trump ran on making manufacturing strong in America. The last thing he wants to do is put tariffs on products that result in American manufacturing business going out of business. That's not what he wants to do. And now maybe that happens, but it's because people didn't get proactive to find a way around it. So I don't think this is doom and gloom. I think there's an opportunity here. There are programs to get grants to allow small companies to automate. Um, and so I think, there's opportunities for us to independent, big, small, medium, whatever, get help, and the government's there to help.
That's a great point, and I think that's good advice for everybody. Is anytime you're facing scary change, don't just roll over and play dead. Go on the
Amen.
attack and try to find other solutions and be creative. Very well said. Matt, did you want to finish off with another question?
No, I think that's a good way to end with advice for these companies, whether it be holistically on a global perspective or even locally, what you just mentioned with the SBA. I think that's a great way to kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. That's something I even need to take into account myself. Is that if there's always change being thrust upon us, and the only constant is change, using that cliche. And the worst thing people can do, especially if it could be catastrophic change, is just to accept it. I think you explain that very well. So I do think that's a great way to end. I'll put show notes to your company and LinkedIn and your book there as well. Surfing the Waves of Organizational Excellence. Is that the subtitle on it again?
Yes, it's Surfing the Waves of Organizational Excellence. Yep.
Oh, look at that. Actually, sharp as a tack sometimes.
It's tough.
Okay, well, thank you, Jim. I really do appreciate your time. And Matt, thank you once again for co-hosting. Any closing words, Jim, that you want to end on?
Well, I think it's really important that we go forward with a view of optimism. I think there's a lot of good days ahead of us. I think a lot of good work has been done. The uncertainty is clearing up, and it's time to stop all the blah, blah, blah and get on with it.
Great words. Oh, that's a mic drop right there. Gentlemen, thank you again once again for your time.
See you
Thanks
soon.
so much. Good job. Thank you, guys.